You know, when the former Premier and former Deputy Premier resigned over the span of a weekend, it was a true moment of celebration where we thought surely the press is going to have to say something. Just a moment of a tail between their legs, one comment like, "Oh, well, this is a blemish on the Premier's record and puts into question if the head is this rotten, how's the body?" There's not going to be any ICAC hearings about journalists having scallopini lunches with these people, is there? But instead, the media machine, exactly like the T-800 and Terminator 1, especially seeing it was on Channel 9 and their graphics is about as shit as Terminator 1's, it just kept going. As soon as the Premier got outed on suspicions of corrupt behaviour, it was... Do we really need an ICAC?
Anyone who believes in free, fair and just society has seen that undermined this morning.
Well, that is disturbing if true, but what's also disturbing is that the 3D puppet from the song Starlight is now an MP in the Northern Beaches. But what is this massive undermining of a free, fair and just society? Is it his party turning Facebook into WeChat? No? Something bigger than the complete monitoring of all speech at all times. God, that must be bigger than Clive Palmer's order at Macca's. All right, I'll have 2 sundaes, actually 7. I'll have 5,000 fries, 50 Big Macs. Do you guys have those grand Big Macs anymore? Yeah, okay. 1 million of those.
ICAC has shown itself over and over again that it will use every single publicity trick in the book to make the lives of innocent people as difficult as they possibly can.
Yes! Good point! This publicly funded body with a mandate to investigate corruption and nothing but a bunch of publicity whores led by whoever that guy is. I do this for the clout. Damn ICAC and its second to none stuntery where they announced that Gladys Berejiklian was under investigation by rope walking from their headquarters to Parliament, Peter Hall locking himself in a vault, the vault getting dropped in the harbour and the code to get out spells Brandis gone. No, they went bigger. They sent a letter. A viral marketing strategy if I ever saw one. Or at least it will be when Jason Falinski's government is done putting restrictions on Facebook.
No one under an investigation from ICAC has ever been convicted of corruption at ICAC.
Oh really? Well, being the quote controversial Labour-aligned comedian that I am, I'm naturally best friends with Eddie Obeid. So let's give him a call. See, I've got him on burner here. Eddie? Yeah, Joddies. See, first name basis. Were you convicted of corruption? I absolutely was, you lib. Not by ICAC though. ICAC doesn't have the powers to convict people of nothing. They're just a really specialised royal commission. They gather evidence like I gather checks. Right. So basically Jason Falinski is, I don't want to be mean here, but a dishonest piece of shit that might as well be saying, "That's it! No more bus drivers! Not one of them stepped up and prevented the Link Cafe siege!" Now you're catching on. Hey, love the Gladys stuff, man. Keep smashing the wogs. Their dodgy shouldn't be in Parliament. Hey, steady it. Anyway, the takeaway here is that a no-name Liberal politician on Sky News was spouting absolute shit. What a rare lapse in judgment. Let's see what the best of the best Shari Markson had to say, and hold on a second, that's not Sky. How did she escape out of the tiny little fish tank next to the Seven City studio, slither through the vents? I learned much from my lab leak investigations. What's she got to add?
I think that we've seen now the corruption watchdog in New South Wales, the ICAC, has a strong history not of unrooting corruption, because corruption is still rife in politics, particularly in local government. Right. And while we're at it, what's the point of firefighters? Still fires with those around. Teachers exist, and yet so does Hamish McDonald. Defund Year 4 education. But it has a strong history of cutting down political leaders and politicians who are later found to be innocent. She wrote a long list years ago of supposed ICAC innocents, of which, I don't know, maybe a couple of them actually were. Who knows? That's the entire point of an investigation. But here's a fun game. Choose one name at random, just like I did, and I bet it will become clear within seconds that, oh, they're innocent like O.J. Simpson's innocent. The glove fit, and yet they still acquit. More on that later, but back to why ICAC doing its job is ICAC's fault.
ICAC knew their actions today would leave a lockdown state without a leader in the middle of the most damaging health crisis in recent history, and they chose to proceed anyway. The feelings within government is if ICAC does not have slam dunk evidence that proves Gladys Berejiklian is either corrupt or has aided corruption, then the heat turns on the body itself and the taxpayer-funded lawyers who run it. Georgie, the stakes are very, very high.
First off, hats off, sir. I really don't think I've ever seen anyone who registers as a quite so quickly. You knocked George Columbaris clear off his perch with one raised eyebrow. No! No! Haven't I suffered enough? Taxpayer funded? You know who else was taxpayer funded? Gladys Berejiklian. Being Premier is not like being a Justice of the Peace. Premiers are compensated for their invaluable service of hanging around high school debate club nerds. The difference, however, is that ICAC pays for itself. Clearly. Foreign investors do not want to put their money into two-bit banana republics where you sink $1 trillion in only to have some camo-wearing official say, "Give it back."
Give what back?
You might think we're far off, but getting closer. Anyway, that's how the press painted Gladys Berejiklian being investigated on corruption charges. An early 2000s Dave Chappelle conspiracy of, it's just a witch hunt against celebrities, man. Followed by, and isn't this amazing, the biggest bootlickers of Berejiklian turning around the next day and saying about Andrews,
the Premier has dismissed pressure to stand down over an anti-corruption investigation into Victoria's fire services.
Oh, the timing, eh? It's basically a Stephen King novel. Press couldn't bring themselves to tell Gladys to step down for an entire year. And even when she did step down, instead of explaining why, their response was, well, Daniel also has to step down. Why?
Unlike the corruption probe into Gladys Berejiklian, there is no suggestion of personal gain for Daniel Andrews, and IBAC hasn't confirmed if it's scrutinising the Premier.
There we go. No wonder every dumbass that writes to me always says with these two spelling errors, every time, you are biased towards Labour. Labour is just as corrupt. The press work very hard to make dummies write that. They spend copious resources attempting to create the illusion. A crystal clear observable pattern, mind you. The Liberals get caught with something, the press immediately diminishes the severity of it if they report on it at all, and then the next day, no shame at all. How do we put shit on Labor so everyone shrugs it off and goes back to their voting fault lines? Andrews is... No, we can't say he's done anything nearly as bad. Christ, we're really grasping at straws here. Story completely disappeared in a week because it's based off of a rumour. Anyway, you going to resign? In fact, Albo should resign too while we're at it. Come on, 2 scalps for 1. It's only fair. Such an insane request, and yet they ask without a hint of irony when you know what IBAC in Victoria is currently investigating. A former faction boss may be hiring a staffer who spent most of their time doing party faction stuff instead of stuff for the state. Maybe purchasing $15,000 worth of stamps that went to mailing Labor members and not mailing citizens. Which, don't get me wrong, I'm glad that is being investigated, but our f***ing Premier alone is accused of misspending $25 million, as well as saying, yeah, pork barreling's mad. Just using billions of taxpayer dollars for no other purpose than getting us re-elected is mad. And then defending the claim after she said it. But, Watergate moment of our time, John Coote's furniture amount of money being spent on stamps, not at all related to Daniel Andrews' office. I mean, I know it's hard to speak truth to power. Nonetheless, in times like this, it's the responsibility of those with a voice to say, Dictator Dan has been caught red-handed. Now, some of the Zoomers in the office have concocted a very clever image that sums up the situation perfectly. Daniel Andrews' face over Chairman Mao. Now, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words, and that really does say it all. I'll give you this, though. Say one day it's uncovered that Daniel Andrews also had a secret lover, Derelict. You just hate me because you ain't me, honey. And he also hypothetically exposed tens of millions of dollars in grants and IBAC exposed it. You know what I'd be saying? Good. I would not be calling for IBAC to be punished like the press is currently calling for ICAC to be punished. And you know why? Because I'm a regular member of the public that doesn't want to see public money misspent, no matter how tiny the amount is. You want to weed out that culture before it becomes Bermuda or the federal Australian government. That's my view, but that is not the view of the Murdoch press in 9 Fairfax. They clearly think IBAC is doing the right thing and ICAC is not. And in a way, they're right. Because ICAC was set up by a Liberal Premier given zero powers to prosecute, and you know why? Because they wanted it to act as a tax-funded dirt unit on the Labor Party. Unfortunately for them, the lawyers that ran it, they were all like, no, we're just going to investigate whatever comes our way, and that the one who set it up was one of the first ones it got. suck shit. Who'd have guessed that the party primarily funded by workers primarily attracts people that enter public life to serve the public, while the party primarily funded by big business seems to attract this swill of the corporate world, weren't talented enough to climb the ladder themselves, so they thought, oh no, I'll get in for a bit and do that company some favours and then they'll have to do me a favour. Who'd have guessed that when you look at the tally board, it's not even comparable? Now, and doesn't this say everything? The same party that set it up, now looking at the tally board, thinks, nah, not a fan anymore. And so the Liberals slashed ICAC's funding by 10%. ICAC was forced to lay off a quarter of its staff, while IBAC gets funding increases year on year, and yet ICAC, still in its form, still finding shit like this, while IBAC is finding this. And so now the press and the Liberal Party itself, it seems, are all calling for a regulator to be put on ICAC. You know, so it does its job. That's why you've got to subscribe to this channel, you know, just so you know what these pricks are doing, because this attack on ICAC is essentially the Liberals saying, we want to get away with corruption. Well, don't we all? But if we can't, eye for an eye.
Please share and comment below. Comment.